me see. Would somebody do me a favor, Mr. Ryan, if you do me a favor and just have a look at, actually, I don't know if you have the YouTube link. I know, we're good. Okay, so we don't have everybody just yet, but I think we have enough people that it's probably wise to start and to keep the show on the road. So let me just see if we have Master Wheatley in yet. I don't think I saw him joining yet, but he is scheduled to join us. So just for everybody here, I'd like to welcome you to the webinar with Miss Jessie Barr. Jessie is an accredited sport and performance psychologist, former Olympian, I suppose always for life you're an Olympian, and a PhD researcher at the University of Limerick who works with Sport Ireland Institute. And working with a lot of individual athletes and sports in the preparation of their athletes for major championships. Last year, she was the lead psychologist for Team Ireland at the European Games and the European Youth Olympic Festival. So quite an accomplishment. And we'll let Jessie take over, complete the introduction and jump into the webinar in just a moment. But I'd like to welcome at this point in time also a special guest from Italy via the Netherlands, Grandmaster Wim Bos. Always lovely to have you and a pleasure to virtually be in your company again. And then we are expecting as well to have Master Kenneth Wheatley on the call, who is the president of the Irish Taekwondo Association. So hopefully he can make it. And without any further ado, I would like to hand over to Jessie and take it away, I guess.
Great. Well, look, I'm going to share my screen straight away. I might as well get started before you doing any introductions. So there's no more looking at each other's faces. It's about looking at my screen now. So yeah, look, Adrian, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate however many, I think we're heading towards 40 people so far, have clicked in on your Sunday evening, which should usually be a kind of a wind down time of the week. So for you guys to all tune in today, I really, really appreciate it. So look, as the kind of title suggests, we're going to be looking at some mental skills tonight. So the idea of developing and expanding your mental toolbox. So look, sports psychology, there's an awful lot to it. It's quite broad. We could be here all night talking about it. So I've kind of plucked a few kind of key things that I think will be really great for you guys to be able to, you know, if you never work with a sports psychologist again, you have some skills you can take away and start applying right now to whatever stage you're at in your Taekwondo journey. Some things that you can apply outside of that into kind of your general life, and it won't take a huge amount of work to do it. It's something you can go away and practice straight away put into your training, put it into your competition whenever they eventually get back. And obviously we can't ignore the fact that we are still in a pandemic. I know that the lockdown has lifted, but it by no means has gone away. So I will start off with kind of a few kind of coping strategies that you guys can start taking on board. Now, it might seem a bit late now, it's December and it started in March, but it's never too late to kind of develop a bit of resilience, develop some coping strategies around coping with COVID, because it isn't something that's going to leave us once 2020 ends. It's not going to stay in 2020. So to have that resilience going forward. Okay, so look, I suppose, you know, I'm working at Sport Ireland. My job is to help, you know, prospective Olympians qualify for the games and prepare for the games in Tokyo. And obviously, you know, when I bought my lovely, where is my diary? My lovely 2020 diary at the start of the year, kind of felt like it was, you know, when March hit, felt like, was this a waste of money? Why did I bother buying this? And I'm sure a lot of you felt the same throughout the year, that 2020, you were starting it. It was an exciting year for all sorts of reasons, whatever those personal reasons were for you. And a lot of those maybe had to, you know, be postponed, were cancelled, were moved, were changed. So you might feel coming towards the end of the year, looking back, that it's just a year I want to cancel and pretend like it never happened. And it'd be very easy to do that because, look, let's be honest, it's been a really challenging year for everyone. This has been my box room since the start of March. I haven't been back to the Institute in Dublin. I'm based in Waterford, so this is where I spend all my time, in this little room. You know, and it's been a challenge. and it's been a challenge for everyone. But instead of looking back on 2020 through, with anger, frustration, or sadness, and looking at it as something that is just something we want to forget about, in order to develop resilience, maybe we can learn from it. And that's what we're going to look at to start with before we get into more the kind of mental skills training specific kind of things. So people are still joining away. This is great. Numbers are creeping up. So look, like I said, start of the year, you probably had a plan. I don't know what championships you guys were due to have. I'm sure there were Europeans and Worlds and underage and senior and all sorts of big games and championships and major things coming up for you guys. Maybe some of you were in leaving cert and were affected by that. Some of you maybe are finishing college, had to do that from home. Maybe work had different things. Some of you might have weddings. There's all sorts of things that obviously your plan, and you had in your head, your plan is going to be nice and straightforward. You'd start the year and you just achieve your goal. And unfortunately, probably looked a bit more, screen forward, like this. Let's be honest, this is probably what 2020 looked like for a lot of us. And 2020 doesn't have to be a time that we need to forget about, because I think there's an awful lot to learn from the setbacks and the challenges we've all faced this year. And I think it's something that you can apply. If you can learn to apply the challenges and the lessons that you've learned personally and that we've all learned as a collective to, going forward back into your Taekwondo career and how you then, approach challenges and approach setbacks. It's a really important learning curve. So look, any sporting career probably looks similar to the year that we've had this year. So obviously I was an Olympian myself. I competed in the 400-meter hurdles in athletics. Adrian actually works with my former coach, who was just brilliant. And unfortunately, I spent an awful lot of my career injured. So my career probably looked a bit like that bottom picture, that reality picture. And it's not those dips in the picture that matter, those tough times, those challenges, those setbacks. It's what you learned on that little upward curve. So that, going down into the dip happens, injuries happen, underperformance, failures, disappointments, all those kind of things happen. They'll happen to everyone, no matter what your plan is or how much you prepare. And what's most important is the journey on the way back up, and what you learn and what you take from it to make sure the next time is better. And that's what we're going to do to start with. And that's what kind of resilience is. And I love, when I talk about resilience, I love using this kind of imagery. So when it comes to, whether we're looking back on 2020 or just a general setback, what resilience is if you look at that sparse, dry, cracked, horrible looking landscape, resilience is the idea of adapting to adversity. So it could be, if you're a resilient person, you could be that little flower developing through a difficult time. And that's all resilience is. There's loads of different definitions for resilience. And if you're to kind of break it down, it is just how you positively adapt to an adversity, to a challenge, to a setback, to something difficult, no matter what it is. And resilience is a skill. It's not something we're born with as babies. It's something we learn. And it's something we keep adding to as we get older. So the more setbacks we face, as we learn from them and we learn coping strategies, we're becoming more resilient by that as well. So let's all say we're all going to come out of 2020 more resilient in some way, if we choose to. So, okay, how do we start? How do we develop that resilience? And I suppose I did a similar workshop like this with another group when we were still in the second lockdown. But now we're kind of out of the two lockdowns. So let's just look back. We're at the end of the year. What are the lessons from 2020? What are the things that I have learned? And that's where you develop your resilience. So, okay, let's start with the positives. And they might be harder, so you might need to take a bit more time. And I would encourage, it would be nice to get this interactive. I know there's some people who are probably watching and can't interact, but I'm not expecting everyone to turn on their microphones, but maybe into the chat box. You can send it directly to me if you don't want it to go publicly, or if you're happy for it to go into the public chat box. What are the kind of positive things that happened for you? In a challenging year, was there anything you can take from it? And I know myself and Adrian, before we let all you guys in from the waiting room, we were chatting about it. And I think we both see the value of, a workshop like this would never have happened in normal times. How many of us would be able to travel on a Sunday evening to go to the same venue to sit and listen to a psychology webinar for an hour and a half? Probably not that many. And now here we are, all from the comfort of our own homes, able to join in. So that's been a real positive for me. I've been able to work more with groups that I would never usually work because we're now using the technology more. And this is something I'll get to use now going forward. So if anyone is willing to throw it into the chat box, something maybe that positive that came out of it for you, because it's probably not something we look back on that much. And it's important to recognize that it wasn't all a waste and not everything was terrible. So I'm not going to wait until things start bumping into the chat. If anyone wants to, brilliant. Someone already joining, thank you. So appreciating friends and family more, really good. Someone's raising their hand. If you want, when you're raising your hand, I can ask you to unmute if you wanted to join. Declan, I think it is, if you wanted to say something, Declan, work away. But I think a lot of people are coming away from this time seeing that, I don't know if you're going to be able to speak actually, Declan. I think someone, I'm not sure. I'll keep going anyway, unless I hear someone pipe up. But yeah, I think a lot of people are realizing the importance of friends and family, and not what we've missed out on, but actually what we actually do need, and what are the most important things. So that's, I think, have been really important for a lot of people. So, okay, recognizing the positives is really important because we don't do it a lot after a challenge. Okay, but obviously a challenge comes with difficult things. What could have gone better? Oh, we've got some more into our chat. I'm just going to keep jumping back and forth as you guys are putting stuff in. I've lost the chat. Where is it? It's gone. I'm sure it'll pop back up. There it is. Working from home is a great thing. I 100% agree. I think it gives you so much more freedom. And just to have that extra bit of time. For me, I was working twice a week at the Institute, and I've removed 8 hours of a week of driving. So essentially a day's worth of work a week I was driving to and from Dublin. So I've, saved a lot of time and a lot of money. Ability to adapt to restriction. Yeah, I think that's really important to recognize, is that we have that ability to adapt to restriction, and recognizing how well and how quickly all of us adapted. We think when we first heard about the lockdown and how within a week everyone had just adapted and we just learned to live with it, which is brilliant. And it's amazing to see how quickly we can adapt when we have to. So, okay, as much as, it's really important to focus on the positives, things didn't go well. So what could have gone better? So what are the things that could have gone better for me this year? What are the things that I could have done better? Because some things were within my control that I could have done better. And what would I change? So that's important to recognize. So if anyone wants to throw those into the chat box. Time to start new projects or investigate new ideas. 100%. I think we were kind of gifted the gift of time, literally, this year. Not having competitions, not having the training. You now have to think outside the box, but also plan ahead. Learning new technology was good too. Yeah, I've learned an awful lot. I had never even heard of Zoom before lockdown, and I'm sure a lot of people hadn't either. And I think that whoever invented it is very, very wealthy now. So I think, to learn all these new ways of communicating with people, I think, and has been brilliant. So as much as, and it's great that so many positive things coming through, but for you, it's maybe to reflect what could have gone better. And there's things that could have gone better that were in my control, that weren't in my control, that I could have done better. And I suppose that's a really important key thing to factor in, is, were they in my control? So what could have gone better and what could I have done better? And if they were in my control, how can I implement the lessons this time around? So this time around being going into the new year. So I've learned a lot from 2020. I know there's positives. I know the things that didn't go well. I know what I could have done better. And this is what I'm going to do about it going forward. So maybe for you, those of you who've been, you haven't been able to train all this time, maybe it increased your motivation. Maybe now you realize how much you love your sport, and maybe you took it for granted. It was just part of the routine. You never really thought about it. And suddenly when it's taken away, like it has been, it makes you realize how much you want to achieve in it. So those are just some things for you guys in your own private time to have a think about going into the end of this year. More coming into our chat here. Sometimes took on too much out of a feeling of need to be interactive and active. Yeah, I hear you. I think there was such an opportunity to be kind of isolated, or feeling that, you're working from home, so you should be saying yes to things. Yeah, so sometimes maybe you took on too much. So some people were not busy at all, and some people maybe were too busy. So yeah, really some really good things. And I think that's a really important lesson to learn going forward, is how can you manage that going into the new year? So just some things to think about. So, sorry, my screen has been really slow. So this is what that would look like. is your positives and your work-ons. If you're to just now narrow them down, what went well and what didn't. And with the work-ons is focusing on what the contingency plan is, or what am I going to do going forward to learn from this? And that's where resilience comes from. It's not just recognizing when things go badly, it's learning from it and applying those lessons. Okay, so when it comes to resilience, and I think we've all heard about this idea during lockdown a lot, and it's one of the sports psychologist mantras: focus on the controllables. You know, control the controllables, focus on what you can control. And it's really, really important, and especially in a time like at the moment. So the way we're going to look at it is in terms of things that we can control, things we can influence, and things that are uncontrollable that we need to either learn to adapt to or accept. So if you think about yourself as that inner circle, that controllable, they're the only things I can really, truly control are me. Outside of that, the circle of influence are the things that maybe significant others, people closest to me that I may have some influence on. And then finally, the things we just cannot control. And we're going to look at that a bit more closely, because when it comes to developing our resilience, you need to focus on what you can control, because you're not going to become more resilient if you keep trying to change things that you just can't control. So let's start on the outside. And I suppose at the moment we're still in a bit of kind of, all things around COVID. So things we can't control at the moment, for example, our time. Can't go back in time. We can't skip ahead until this is all over. We may have a bit of an influence over COVID, but ultimately we don't have a lot of control over what the virus does, the government decisions, the weather, something small. I know we were talking about at the start about how cold it is and, not being able to train outside as much. And the actions of others. And I think that's something that a lot of us get very frustrated with at the moment, is seeing the actions of others, maybe not, paying heed to the restrictions like I may be, and how unfair that feels, but they're out of our control. There's nothing we can do. So these are some of the things we need to learn to accept or adapt to. Things that might be in our influence could include, and you might notice here I have my emotions. And you're probably thinking, okay, but why isn't you put my emotions in the controllable, the inner circle, because they're mine, they belong to me? And actually, no, your emotions are not fully in your control as much as you think they are. Your emotions are a response to something, and we don't have full control over them. What we do have control over is how we respond to the emotion that happens. So say, for example, you see something on the TV, maybe it was the government announcement of the second lockdown, and you felt that frustration rise. You cannot believe we're going back into this. This is so unfair. I can't believe this, how it's going to affect me again. And you felt that frustration. You could either decide to take that frustration out on someone in your household and get angry and get frustrated and shout at them, or you could decide, I'm going to take myself out and go for a walk or go for a jog and just get this frustration out of me. That's what's in your control. The initial emotion is not, unfortunately. So it's learning how to have a gap between my emotion and my response. Having that little gap can be really, really important. And then other things you can influence might be other people. So people closest to me. So maybe you guys, in your individual clubs and groups might have been training over Zoom, maybe doing some workouts. Maybe you were doing even just like group quizzes and stuff. I know Zoom quizzes kind of died a death after a while, but, keeping each other motivated, in terms of keeping each other healthy by encouraging each other to all follow the guidelines. Your choices could be dictated by other people, and other people's choices might be dictated by yours. All those kind of things to be aware of that I may influence. And finally, and the most important, are the things that are in my full control. And some of those are your tangible things: your sleep, your nutrition, your training. So you might be saying, well, actually, I'm not a very good sleeper. That's not in my control, because we can't, unfortunately, fully control falling asleep, but we have control over the actions we do to encourage going to sleep. Obviously, our nutrition, training we do from home, work from home, obviously could be included in there. And probably one of the ones we get overlooked a bit more is more the internal, the more psychological elements that are in our control. So our mindset, our attitude. So that could be, having a negative mindset, a negative attitude to the situation we're in. This is so unfair. This was meant to be a big year for me. I was in such good shape, and then all my competitions got cancelled. This is so unfair. And you can be kind of a victim of your circumstance. Or you could say, okay, you know what? This is just a terrible situation, but we're all in this together. How am I going to make the best of this situation? So that's a more positive attitude and mindset to have. Again, your choices, what you decide to do. with your day, whether you decide to get up and train as normal and, you know, use your time wisely, or decide, you know what, I'm just not going to do anything today. Both are okay. Sometimes both are needed. What you pay attention to, whether you're scrolling on Twitter all day and reading all the bad news, on your focus, and then how you respond to things like your emotions, like other people, like other things happening outside of you. So while at the moment, a lot of things, you probably have a feeling of like things getting taken from you. You know, our control has been taken, our certainty has been taken, a bit of my future has been taken, everything is uncertain and unclear. These are still things that you have full control over, and it's really important to focus on those at the moment if you want to develop that resilience. Okay, so to keep going on about resilience, we have something in the chat box. Oh yeah, I meant to actually say that at the start, so thank you, Adrian. So if anyone does have a burning question that you'd like to ask, please throw them into the chat box. If they're really relevant to what's on the slide there, I'll answer it in there and then. And if not, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. But if something comes into your head, type it into the chat box. It won't distract me, so don't worry. Because it'd be great to have, you know, if there's something that comes up about one of the slides, if you want clarification on, please, by all means. That's what this is for. I don't want this to be a lecture. I want this to be interactive. So, okay. So if you think about resilience, and again, before we move on, I just want to finish up a bit on resilience before we move on. And I think this is, again, something we hear a lot about at the moment, this idea of resilience. And if you think about your resilience as like a bank account, I saw it written about that a while ago, the idea of your resilience bank account. I really liked that as an analogy, so I've stuck with it. So imagine your resilience bank account is exactly that. You withdraw from it. So during difficult times, you withdraw from your resilience. So you're taking something from it, but it can be topped up with certain things. So what are those kind of things? What would they look like? Sorry, my computer's just very slow today. Okay, so what are the things that cause us to withdraw from our resilience? So at the moment, this year has probably tested our resilience to the max. So things that might withdraw from our resilience: training. I know obviously at the moment training is probably a bit of a safe haven and it's an outlet, but training can obviously withdraw from a physical point of view and a mental point of view from your resilience physically and mentally. If you get ill, if you're bored at the moment, you know, it takes a lot of resilience to actually cope with just being bored. I know it doesn't seem like much. You know, emotions, if you're in school, you can obviously supplement in work. Anger, anxiety, fear, stress, frustration, all of those kind of difficult emotions that you may feel at the moment, or maybe after a bad performance, or maybe when you get injured, or any kind of setback that you may face, will withdraw from your resilience to keep going and keep you feeling positive and keep you moving forward. So, okay, if these things affect your resilience and cause you have to draw and withdraw from that resilience bank account, what are the things I need to put in to make sure it stays topped up so I don't just burn out completely? And they're going to be really basic things that you're going, is she really telling us this? But sometimes we need that reminder. So things to remember is having a good night's sleep, making sure that we actually have our full, you know, a full amount of energy, being, you know, having our nutrition is on point, exercising. So as much as you guys are all training, sometimes exercising, whether it's just going for a nice walk or walking your dog or just going for a jog. So it's not necessarily exercise for a purpose. It could be just exercise for the sake of moving my body or getting outside. Spending time with your friends and that kind of energy boost that can give you, and your family as well. And time outdoors. There's so much research that's coming out at the moment, and there's some from UL specifically where I'm studying, that would suggest that spending time in nature is really good for your mental health, and it can actually be more beneficial to your mental health. Exercising outdoors is more beneficial to your mental health than just exercising. So spending time outdoors is really, really positive for you overall, your well-being and resilience. School, as much as it might take from your resilience, like if you enjoy it or you're seeing progress or you like going to see your friends, having hobbies and having things to do. And of course, as much as training withdraws, training can be something that can actually add to your resilience and your well-being. So just some things to consider when it comes to resilience. We're all developing it all the time, depending on our circumstances. We are taking from it. It's our resilience, it's our well-being. We are drawing away from it, but we can keep it topped up if we make sure we're looking after number one. So, okay, I've mentioned a sleep routine, and I think it would be amiss to me to skip on without giving you some ideas about how to actually look after your sleep. Because like I said, it is a controllable if you actually do the right controllable steps. So you've probably got plenty of you in the audience here who, you're that person who takes 2 hours to fall asleep and you're lying wide awake all night. So your sleep routine is probably the more controllable part rather than your sleep. I probably should have put sleep routine. And your sleep routine is literally just that. It's the actions that you do repetitively every single day that will encourage a good night's sleep. So things like having a regular bedtime and wake time so that your circadian rhythm starts to actually, recognize when it is time to become sleepy and when it is time to be awake. If you're up at a different time every single day, your body will never recognize, when it's time to be awake and when it's time to be asleep. Having, actually looking after the bedroom environment, making sure it's cool, it's not too warm, making sure there's no distracting light getting in through curtains or flashing little lights of something charging, anything that might distract you or, cause you to toss and turn. When you get up in the morning, try to seek out some natural light, even if it's just waking up and opening your curtains, or if you wake up too early to actually see the natural light before work, get one of those Lumi alarm clocks, which kind of imitates natural light in the morning to just, again, kickstart your body clock. And then the things no one ever wants to hear, limiting your caffeine and limiting your screen use. And look, I tried everything in my power. I even bought these ridiculous blue light glasses that I keep beside me. They look ridiculous, I know. I bought them because I'm terrible for being on my laptop until all hours of night or being on my phone before I go to bed. And really, the research is there, and we all know we shouldn't be on our phone before bed. And the reason we all know it is because it's true. So it's not just because of the blue light. Obviously, the blue light that comes from things like laptop screens, TV screens, our phone, that obviously is bad for the production of melatonin, which is a sleep hormone that makes us feel sleepy. But also, it distracts us. It actually wakes us up. So if you're watching things, you're scrolling through Instagram and things are grabbing your attention, and there's a video and then there's a sound and then there's color, your brain is not getting a chance to actually wind down because you're keeping it awake. So actually avoiding your screens for even just 30 minutes. I'm not saying for 2 hours, just half an hour before bed. Using your bed for bed specific activities. I'll let you use your imagination there, but basically just sleep and whatever else you do just in bed. What I mean by that is not using your bed as your workstation, not using it for schoolwork, just using it for sleep. Because our brains are habitual creatures and we get to know where. So this is my workspace. When I finish work for the day, I close down my laptop, I close the door, and I'm finished work. If I was to sit on my laptop in bed, which is the room next door, my brain then would start to kind of get mixed signals about, okay, when I go to bed, is it work time that I need to be awake, or is it sleep time that I need to start winding down? So we need to give our brain a very clear message about what our bed is for. So as I said, putting away your screen for 30 minutes is really important. So you having a nice relaxing wind down routine in that 30 minutes instead could be really important. So it could be just reading a book, doing some stretching or some yoga, maybe doing some mindfulness or meditation. Just something that's just relaxing, and it's just signaling to your body and to your brain that this is time to start winding down. You're not waking it up with anything. So just some things to consider, and all of those things are very much within your control. What else could you be doing at the moment to kind of help you cope? And I think to keep that positive mindset can be really difficult at the moment. So a practice that I got into quite a lot, and I think a lot of people have during lockdown, is practicing gratitude. Recognizing that even during this really challenging time, there's still things to be thankful for. And there is research backing it up to say why gratitude is so important. So it does help us not just feel more positive emotions, but be aware of them. Because sometimes there's positive emotions there, but we bury them because of all the negativity around. So actually bringing them to the surface by practicing gratitude and being aware of things I'm thankful for. It can help you improve your sleep because you're not as caught up on negatives and overthinking things. And it can obviously reduce your anger and aggression because you're focused on the positives. So how could you do it? Journaling. So you could write at the end of every night a couple of things you're thankful for from your day. It could be once a week. I'd say not setting too much of a strict routine around it. Just whenever you feel you want to do it, writing in a little journal. And I think it's a really nice practice to get into. A nice idea if maybe you have kids at home or you're living in a house where there's a few of you there, is every time there's something happens that you're grateful for, you could get a little sticky, I have post-it notes, that's the word I'm looking for. You could even just get a post-it note Write what you're grateful for, fold it up and put in your gratitude jar. And maybe at the end of each week or the end of each month, reading them out and reminding yourself that, oh my God, this has been a difficult week, but we've had some really positive things happen. And then even in the moment, if something positive is happening, like, you know, something really nice is happening, you're getting to meet up with your friend for coffee for the first time and just realizing how grateful you are. And this is something that you took for granted so much. So just practicing gratitude can be a really lovely exercise and practice to get into, maybe to consider into the new year. Recognizing your opportunities. This is something that I work on a lot with athletes who are injured, because again, injury is a real challenge to any athlete. It's one of the most difficult things, one of the most common things, but yet one of the most difficult things to cope with, because it kind of takes so much away from you. So trying to recognize what are the potential opportunities in this really difficult situation that I'm in. And I think it's a really positive way of thinking about things. So say, for example, using that injury example, okay, you're injured for 6 weeks, you can't kick because you have a tear in your hamstring, so you can't do any kicking. So what can you be doing? What are the opportunities that you can do? So, okay, maybe you can't do your full sparring sessions now. So does that mean you've more time to dedicate to working on some weaknesses? Maybe your core strength could do with some work. Maybe you could do with some, you know, improving some strength or mobility. Maybe could you be using that time to get some work done in school or college? You know, what are the things I can be doing to use that time? What are my opportunities? And it comes back to what we said, those lessons from this year, recognizing just the positive opportunities, not just, so it may not always be positive. You know, for me, lockdown provided more of an opportunity to do work on my PhD. I didn't see it as a positive because I hate doing my PhD, but it was an opportunity. So what are the opportunities despite this difficult situation I'm in? Okay, so does anyone have any questions so far before I move on to the section around looking at mental skills? Cool, okay. So we're going to look at our mental skills toolbox. So we have a few tools that we're going to look at tonight that are basic. Like I said, I could go into loads of different things. We're going to keep it pretty basic and skills that you can take away tonight and try tomorrow. So the first thing I want you to think about, and again, this is open to you guys. If you want to throw them into the chat box, you can. This is a blank screen. I want you to think, now I wasn't sure if the right word was fighter, was athlete. I saw a few different words for why you call someone who does taekwondo, and I don't want to insult anyone, so if I do, I'm sorry. But what are the strengths? Because what we want to do is create an awareness of strengths, what it takes to be the best in what I'm doing. Because obviously if you guys are sitting here at, you know, 6:30 on a Sunday evening, you obviously want to be the best of what you can, the best that you can be. So the first way to start thinking about that is considering what are the strengths of the best, you know, the people in my discipline that I want to be as good as. So someone's throwing me a chat. Never give up even when they're losing. Yeah. So you actually probably call that resilience. Yeah. Consistency. Great. Never give up. Consistency. Confidence. Excellent. They're starting to fly in here, Adrian. So I'm actually going to write these down to make sure I have them beside me so I can refer back, because these are great. Consistent. Confident. Never give up. What are we getting? Adaptability. This is great, really good. Adaptability we've got coming in. Staying calm. Believing in yourself. So again, another type of confidence. Believing in yourself. Commitment, excellent. So what I'll do is I'll send back these slides to Adrian, and I'll include this in this blank slide. Flexibility, literally and metaphorically. Excellent. So physical flexibility and I suppose mental flexibility. Excellent. Yeah. Resilience. This is great, guys. Thank you so much. This is why I want you, because there's no point in me telling you. Oh, good awareness. Sorry, I missed that one. Goal setting. Yeah. Accurate goal setting, important to note, actually. You've said accurate goal setting. Yeah, excellent. So keep those coming in as we're chatting. So why I do this, oh, Morris popped in. Tactical knowledge. Oh my God, these are flying in. This is great. I actually can't write as quickly as they're coming in. Good balance in all areas. So balanced life, I suppose. balance life, work-life balance, sport-life balance, ability to challenge themselves. Yeah. These are excellent, guys. Thank you so much. Okay, keep them coming in. I'll come back to them in a minute if there's any more. So this is the start of what I would call a performance profile. So what's important is to recognize what you see as the best version of what you want to be. So by identifying what you see in the best fighters or the best athletes, you're kind of giving an idea of what that ideal is. And what I do when I sit down with an athlete is do this. And then I say, okay, well, we've written all these things that you've suggested makes the best athlete in your particular event or sport. Where do you differ? So what's the difference between your actual, where you are now, and your ideal that you've just listed out? And, you know, whether it's marking you out of 10 or seeing what you need to improve on or seeing actually where I'm good, by recognizing what the strengths are and seeing where I need to work or where I'm good. So when I send that back, it's something to consider. If you threw something into the chat box, how is my commitment, or how is my confidence, or am I able to stay calm under pressure? So I suppose a lot of the time when you're in sport, you spend a lot of time looking at this. What can I improve? What do I need to do better? What do I need to work on? What are my weaknesses? And the beauty of sports psychology is that we spend more I do anyway. My kind of philosophy is strength-based. So it's looking at what my strengths are already. Because when it comes to it, when you're standing at the side of a mat and you're about to go and fight, all you have to rely on are your strengths. You're not thinking about, well, in 6 weeks, I'm going to be this bit stronger. And, you know, next month I'll have worked on this skill. All you have to rely on are what you have on the day. So that's why it's really important, not only to recognize what you need to work on, but what I'm already good at. So the first kind of skill in your mental toolbox is developing confidence. And someone said it, and I'm really glad it came up so early, because I think if no matter what the sport is or what you're trying to achieve in, you need to have confidence, or you need to be able to believe in your own ability, because that's probably, you can be the best physically, technically and tactically best fighter, best athlete, but if you don't have confidence, it's going to be much harder to back it up. So when it comes to being confident, it's recognizing and acknowledging your strengths. So that's what we're going to look at. So to acknowledge your strengths, so imagine yourself as this pillar. So you are the athlete here, and you want a really balanced athlete across all these different areas of your kind of sport and life. So you think your technical aspects, the physical, tactical, psychological, and then lifestyle. So lifestyle might be a little bit on the outskirts, but it's still important to consider. So when it comes to acknowledging your strengths, it's about acknowledging what all your strengths are across all these areas, because there's no point in saying all of your strengths lie in the physical pillar, because if all the rest of them get ignored, imagining that these 5 pillars are what need to be supporting you as an athlete, if you're only focused on one, you'll be quite unbalanced, aren't you? So obviously you're probably not going to be perfectly aligned and balanced across all 5 of these pillars, but you want to make sure that you're looking after all these areas so that it is a little bit more balanced. You as a person, and someone actually mentioned that having that more balanced life and rounded life is by looking after all these things. So obviously technical, physical, tactical, psychological, you know what I'm referring to here. But lifestyle would be how I manage, you know, those things like life and training balance, my nutrition, my sleep, balancing my schoolwork, making sure I have some kind of a social circle. All those things in your lifestyle, they might get overlooked, but they're really important to create that whole person and to help develop that resilience when things are going wrong as well. But for the purpose of this, we're going to focus on the 4, because obviously they're more specific and you can bring these into your coach. And this is something you can print off. As I said, I'm going to send these out to Adrian. And it can be printed off as a worksheet for you to actually sit down and think, okay, what are my strengths? And when you're doing this, it can be a bit weird, but park your modesty and imagine what your coach would say, what your teammates would say, what people who know you really well would say, what maybe your opponents would say. What are your strengths? Why would someone hate to fight me? Because psychologically, I never crack, or physically, I'm just so strong, or I'm on my endurance and my cardiovascular endurance is so good. You know, what are my strengths? Because you want to be able to acknowledge those. And the beauty of this is you can keep adding to them as you improve in training and as you improve with experience and competition. You improve your strengths and you add to your strengths, which is really exciting. Hopefully you don't lose them too much as long as you stay working on them. Because I could have easily sent you a worksheet and said, my weaknesses, my areas to work on. And you probably would write reams and reams and reams of all the things I need to work on. But that's not the purpose of this here. This is to recognize what I'm already good at. Because if I need to go out and fight tomorrow, I need to know what I already have that I'm bringing to the competition. So that's just something for you guys, again, to do at home. So I've used the example of my baby brother here. Sorry, there's something else in the chat. Oh, yeah. Adrian just throwing a question.
I'm just trying to make it a little bit easier for everyone to get their questions in.
No
So
problem.
I've just set up a Mentimeter slide there. So at any point in time,
perfect.
people can go to the link that I've shared there, put in the code and ask a question, and I'll have all of them tracked so we can present them at the end for the Q&A.
Great.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. No, it's better for you to explain it there rather than me leaving it just sitting there. Okay.
Perfect.
So to try and illustrate the benefit of knowing your strengths, I've used my younger brother, who Adrian will know as well. He's based in Limerick. He's coached by Hayley, his colleague down in Coaching Ireland. And I used this quote, and I actually wasn't stalking interviews with my brother. I actually found this quote looking for, confident athletes and stuff. And I found this quote and it was really fitting. So my brother came fourth in Rio in the Olympics in the 400-meter hurdles, just missed out on a medal, but he did get a bronze medal at the European Championships in 2018. And this was from an interview that he did just after the race. And it highlights him knowing his strengths. So as he says here, when I came off hurdle 8, I still had nearly 100 meters to go. I was like, nah, this French guy is mine, I'm getting it. I'd be confident in my finish, so I just thought it's there and it's mine. So to give a bit of context to this, so the 400-meter hurdles is a 400-meter, so one lap of an athletics track with 10 hurdles. So hurdle 8 is when it really starts to hurt. You're just coming around onto the home straight. Lactic is filling your legs. You're starting to really tire. But that is actually where Thomas is at his strongest. His last 100 meters is one of his strengths. So if he was to do one of those strength kind of charts, his physical strength would be his ability to maintain his speed and his form and everything in that last 100 meters when everyone else is starting to tire. So if you've ever watched him race, if anyone ever has, his first 200 meters pretty much puts everyone into, panic mode because he's usually towards the back of the field. But it's because he's confident enough to know where his strengths lie in having a more consistent race and doesn't go out too hard. He maintains some energy for the finish. So because he's confident, he knows his strengths, he doesn't panic. When he sees people going by him on either side, he doesn't panic. He stays confident and he doesn't make mistakes or, stray from the plan that himself and his coach would have made. And that's where it's really, really important, because if you were ever to watch one of his races, if I would have been in a situation like he's been before, I might have been more likely to start sprinting to go with someone and then completely ruin my whole race plan. So that's where knowing your strengths is really important, because you then use them to your advantage when you are actually competing. So another way of developing confidence is, developing confidence is to gather evidence. So again, a really simple technique you can go and do tonight or go and do tomorrow. And it's literally just gathering all the evidence, gathering all the reasons to say that you are capable of achieving whatever the goal you've set for yourself. So I'm a scientist, I do psychology. It's a fluffy enough science, but it's a science. So as part of that, I have to gather evidence to prove the theory. And so say when I sit down with an athlete, I say, okay, what is your goal for this year? And they say, I want to be national champion. Okay, so you want to be national champion. Tell me all the reasons why that is possible, why you are capable of doing it. And we're going to talk about now, rather than talking about in 6 months when you've done more training. Why are all the reasons you've said that now? And I think, again, it's drawing back to our strengths. It's recognizing all the hard work we're already putting in. So that could be any reason that would go towards you producing a good performance. So to become a national champion, consistent training, you have very clear goals. You are confident. You're confident because you won it last year. So you know how to win. I'm just looking at the examples you guys gave. You're very committed. You will do whatever it takes in training and in competition to make sure that goal happens. Maybe you've gotten stronger. Maybe in the gym, you're physically stronger. You're lifting heavier in a squat, for example. So physically your legs are actually stronger. So you're putting yourself in a better position. So what are all the things, what are all the reasons, what have you done that would make you feel confident? What is all that evidence? And again, writing it down. Like you can't see here, but I'm surrounded by notebooks. I love writing things down because I think there's such a power between the pen and the brain. It kind of solidifies. When I write it down, I see it in black and white. I'm kind of going, okay, I'm processing it better than just thinking it to myself. Once it's written down, you're kind of committing it to memory. So that's just an idea, something small. Why are all the things I could be confident? And think about even in terms of this year, what is the work that I've done that maybe I wouldn't usually have done? Maybe at this time of the year, I'm not usually so fit, or this time of the year, I haven't been working on this aspect and now I am. So going into next year, I don't have to be thinking about that. We can work on building new skills, for example. So just some really simple ways of building confidence is looking inward rather than trying to seek confidence from unstable sources like, oh, I'm up against so-and-so today, I've beaten them before, so I'm confident. If all your confidence comes from external sources that you don't have control over, it's not going to be stable. You won't feel confident over time. Whereas if all the confidence that you draw, if most of your confidence comes from internal, then any external sources are just adding to it and they're just adding to your armory. So always looking inwards for that confidence. Okay, so that's our confidence building activities. I just a quote from Annalise Murphy, who is a sailor. She's going to Tokyo again this year, but she won a silver medal at the Olympics in Rio. So she's aiming for gold in Tokyo. That's what she wants. And when she went to Rio, they spent about 6 months of the year out in Rio, because obviously in sailing, there's an awful lot of variables to consider. You're thinking about the wind, the waves, and the weather conditions, where the land is comparing to the sea and how that affects wind shifts, tides, all those kind of things you have to take into account. So she spent all that time gathering the literal physical evidence so that she knew the race course inside out. So when she actually went out to race, the evidence was there that she could be confident, because she could say, sitting in her boat at that start line, I know exactly where the wind shifts are going to be. I know where I need to do this. I know when I need to do that. So her confidence came from actually developing that physical evidence. Okay, so goal setting is something that actually was mentioned in terms of strengths of the best athletes. So we're going to learn a bit about how to set really good goals. So in terms of sports psychology, we don't really look at short, medium, and long-term goals. Instead, we look at outcome goals, performance goals, and process goals. So when I think about those, what are outcome, performance, and process? So outcome goals are exactly what it says in the tin, the outcome. So whether you win a fight, you get through to the next round, qualify for a certain competition, get onto the podium, things like that. So they're outcomes, but they're not really specific. Performance goals might be a certain amount of points that you score, or a certain amount of kicks that land. And I'm sorry if that terminology is wrong. In athletics, it would be the time you run. So maybe winning the race would be the outcome, the performance would be the specific time. But those two, unfortunately, are not really in our control. Obviously, they would probably sit in the realm of influence, that we can influence them, but we can't control them because there are other people competing against us who want the same thing. So we can't control whether we actually achieve that outcome. What we do have control over is our process goals. So those goals are, I like to use this kind of as an example to demonstrate it or to illustrate it. So your process goals are your stepping stones. They're all the little steps, all the little things, all the little processes that you need to undertake or to achieve or to do in order to achieve that goal that you set for yourself, that outcome goal, that performance goal. You need to be doing these steps to get there. And why I like this image is the idea of setting lots of process goals is really important. Because if you imagine you're trying to cross a body of water here, and the only goal you've set for yourself, so say we'll go back to being national champion as your outcome goal. And the only goal you've set for yourself in 2021 is to get fitter. So you're not fit enough to last the rounds. So I need to get fitter. So imagine that's one little stepping stone. So what happens if it doesn't improve? Does that mean you should lose all your confidence? Not necessarily, but if you have no other reasons to see confidence in that I'm progressing in different ways, or I've done anything positive this year, it's going to be harder to see that progression. But having lots of process goals, so again, thinking back to that kind of pyramid, what are all the areas and all the things I can be setting my process goals in? So maybe in terms of lifestyle, it could be making sure I'm getting my recovery on point, so that my nutrition, my recovery, kind of physical recovery is already good. Technical aspects, you're working on a new technique or trying to solidify a new technique. Maybe you're trying to improve your non-dominant leg. Physical could be just getting stronger, getting fitter, those kind of more specific things. Tactical, I'm not going to even try to give an example because I'd probably give one wrong, but trying to take into account that pyramid, or that kind of column, those 5 columns, and thinking what are the process goals that would all contribute to me achieving this overall goal. Because what's nice is that when you get to a certain level, you don't progress that quickly anymore. You're not seeing big progression, competition to competition. So recognizing all that little bit of progression can be really, really important. So in terms of process goal setting, again, I'm going to give you a blank version of this. So I used myself in my former life as an athlete to kind of demonstrate this. So my overall outcome goal, the goal that I want to achieve for my entire career, is to be national record holder. And to be national record holder, I'd set myself the target of running 54 seconds for the 400-meter hurdles. Now, that was going to be quite a challenge. I would have had to shave over a second off my personal best time. Now, unfortunately, it didn't happen. I got to second on the list. But I can, to try and demonstrate what kind of processes that I needed to achieve, I've kind of written them out. So I considered the 4 bottom quadrants, the 4 bottom bricks, you could call them, if your pyramid. They were like my non-negotiables. They were my foundations, the ones that I had to get right. And they were specific to me. So I was obviously, like you guys, I probably have a dominant kicking leg. I had a dominant hurdling leg. I was dominant with my left leg, or my right leg. So my left leg technique over the hurdle was a bit sloppier, wasn't as quick, wasn't as smooth. So in order to shave that time off my personal best, that needed to be pretty slick, because it was definitely adding a big differential. Obviously confidence and my speed endurance, that's kind of your bread and butter as a 400-meter hurdler, and plyometric strength, that kind of explosive power that I used to be working on in the gym. They were the things that I was like, plyometric strength was probably one of my biggest strengths, and it was something that I was continually working at to get better. So it wasn't always working on my weaknesses. It was knowing that I'm good at this, so I'm going to make myself really good, because I knew my speed wasn't as good as other 400 hurdlers. So they're just some of the examples that I've set, but we're going to come back to this in a second, because what you may notice is they're not that specific. So when it comes to setting your process goals, now we've probably all heard of this, SMART goal setting, but there's a reason. Again, like anything, there's a reason. If you're hearing about these kind of things a lot, there's often a reason to it. And there's a lot to be said about using this SMART goal idea around setting your goals. So when it comes to building your pyramid, you want to set your goals as your process goals are SMART. So keeping them specific. And that's probably something that I'm going to show you again, is that on my previous slide, they weren't that specific. They were quite general. So specific goals would mean that you have a very specific target. So again, you might have the idea of wanting to be national champion, and to do that, I'm going to get stronger. But getting stronger is a very vague goal, because if you add an extra 2.5 kilos in a year onto your squat, technically, yes, you've gotten stronger, but it's not a very specific, is that going to help you? Whereas if you say, I want to be squatting an extra 10 kilos by the summer, that's a much more specific. It's still the same. You want to get stronger, but it's setting yourself a specific target, because there's lots of ways you could get stronger. So what am I focusing on? And making the goal measurable, so that you can actually see your progress and track it. So, a lot of the work you'll probably be doing will be in numbers, in weight, in, repetitions, how many times I want to be. Again, like that, I want to be stronger by this many kilos in the gym. Making sure that's achievable is really important, because there's nothing worse than setting yourself up for a goal that you will never achieve, and never achieve within the time. We're going to talk about the time in a second. So for me, setting myself the goal, and achievable or realistic are quite similar. So setting myself the goal of setting the Irish record, it was achievable. It was realistic because of where I sat in terms of my own abilities, but it wasn't so. It was going to have to work really hard. It wasn't so achievable. I was going to just get it without any hard work. I set a goal that was very, very challenging, that it could be done, but all of these things would need to fall into place. And unfortunately, they didn't all fall into place. you don't want to set yourself a goal that is just like, for me, an unachievable, an unrealistic goal would have been Olympic gold medal. Just wasn't going to happen. I knew I was never good enough. So if I put that as my goal, I was just setting myself up for failure, for demotivation, for lack of confidence. So setting a goal for yourself, if it's within a time limit, setting it that it's realistic, I can actually achieve it in this time, that it's achievable. And then finally setting a time limit. So again, having an actual deadline for your goal is really important. So you can actually reflect and see, have I achieved it? If I have, great, how am I going to develop from that? Or if I haven't, maybe I need to reset my processes and see where I need to change them. So to add to my pyramid there, because I kind of purposely left them quite vague. So I've now added the SMART goal setting idea to those previous goals. So like I said, my left leg technique, again, very vague. So I need a quicker touchdown time. So that was a measurable goal. If my touchdown time is quicker in between the hurdles when I'm using my left leg, it means I'm improving my left leg technique. Again, speed endurance. Instead of just saying, I want to improve my speed endurance, I want to improve, which is a 3x300 meters, which was a repeated session for us. I want to see that I'm improving that time by 1 second, things like that. So now I'm adding a bit more specificity, a bit more measurable kind of parameters to my goals. And this is when you go away and do them yourself, giving you a plain one, go away yourself and set those goals and keeping that SMART acronym in mind. So again, you can print these out, you can do them yourselves, you can add whatever little picture you want. I've just used generic copy and paste from Google. So you might have something nicer, maybe a picture of yourself. And then when it comes to goals, before I move on, I think it's really important to recognize that tracking your progress can be such an overlooked and underutilized, but really important aspect to consider. So setting your goals is all one thing, but actually making sure that you're taking note of your progress can be really important, because if you're not recognizing your progress, it's going to be very hard when it comes to, the deadline to see whether you actually have, achieved your goal. So again, like I said, I have my little diary. I had these for all the way through my own training career. And when I say track your progress, you want your objective measures, which are your, what the training session was, but also your subjective measures, which is how you felt it went. So, taking into account what the session was and maybe giving yourself a mark out of 10, 10 being it was a brilliant session, I gave it 100% effort, I achieved all the things I wanted and I did them really well. And obviously 0 being it was a terrible session, I did nothing right. So giving yourself a mark out of 10, and then why? Because if you're giving yourself marks out of 10 and don't explain why the session didn't go well, it's very hard to learn from it. So like we said at the start, you want to learn from things that didn't go well and recognize things that do go well. So a few little ideas and notes you can use after your training, or I've said races, obviously this is from when I was working with athletes, I must have taken that slide from another one. So when you're tracking your progress, take a note after training about what went well. Okay, so after a training session, after a competition, what did go well? What am I happy with? What would I give myself a score out of 10? Why did I give myself a score out of 10? Well, I gave myself an 8 out of 10 today because I felt really energized. I was really motivated. I put in loads of effort and it was actually a pretty good session. Okay, and then what didn't go well and what could have went better? So why wasn't it such a good session? Why did I give myself a 5 out of 10 today? Okay, well, I gave myself a 5 out of 10. If you just give yourself the 5 out of 10, and not having that context would be really hard. So kind of saying why it didn't go well. So I gave myself 5 out of 10 because maybe I was in school all week and I had exams at the start of the week. So I was quite tired and I didn't get a huge amount of sleep during the week. So even just turning up to training was a big step for me. So, it wasn't the best session. Whereas if you just have loads of 5s out of 10 and don't know why, it's going to be very hard to learn from that. So again, learning from it, what will I make sure to do that? What will I do to make sure it goes better? So, okay, this is what I did. This is why it didn't go well. And this is what I'm going to do to learn from that going into the next training session. So tracking your progress, getting yourself a training diary, whether it's written, whether it's in your notes app, whether it's a Google Doc, whatever it is just something that you're actually able to track your progress. And when you look back, you say, God, I actually didn't think I progressed that much, but look at where I was back in November compared to now. Okay, so before I go on to some ideas around coping with nerves, has anyone got any more questions? I think I saw something in the chat box, but it's disappeared. There we go. See if there's anything.
So we do have, for the end of the presentation, there's
Okay.
10 questions in, and there's people voting questions up and down to see which one is the big burning question for you to answer.
Okay, I like that.
So we have plenty there, but I don't know if there's anything that's here and immediate for this part.
No, I haven't seen anything yet, but that's great. It's great to see that. Yeah, because I want to make sure that I'm answering questions that people actually really want to hear.
No problem.
Excuse
yeah,
me.
people are being quite active and busy on Mentimeter, so we have plenty to come back to you with in a while, and I can share that screen so everyone can see the questions.
Sounds great. Okay, so look, we're not. Oh, I don't know what the state of play is for your competition seasons or anything, but let's be honest. I think if I was to make a poll of what were the most common things I've been asked to work on with athletes' nerves, probably top the poll by quite a bit. It's often one of the first things that I get asked if I get an email about from private clients. It's usually to say I get very nervous, I want to get rid of them. So what I'm going to say, and what I know you'll probably notice, is I didn't say removing nerves or getting rid of nerves or eradicating nerves. It's coping with them, because nerves are not something we can get rid of. Nerves, like emotions, are something that happen in response to a thought or a situation or a circumstance. So it's about learning to cope, and there's some coping strategies we're going to look at now. So again, I've used this quote from Roger Federer, and I really like it because I think, if you think of, some of the most accomplished tennis players in the world, he's obviously going to be in that list. And he even says that he still gets nervous, but he's glad he does because it means he still cares. So it's really interesting to think someone of his level and who's been around for so long still gets nervous. Means to say that it's not a bad thing, it's not abnormal, and it's kind of just part and parcel of sport. So how can, I suppose before you go on, I think before I even give you some coping strategies, it's important to probably recognize how nerves affect your performance, because you might see a bit of this when, you're going into competition. You may notice that some of these things happen. And if you know that these things are a normal part of it, you can learn to kind of, recognize that it's not something to worry about. So, sorry, I'm using racing. You can see that I've used some of these slides for previous presentations. So we start to see racing or competing as a threat. So we start to see a competition, we start to see a fight as something to be scared of. So you may have been going into a big competition at the end of the week on a Saturday, and all week you've been really excited. You can't wait to get out there and compete. You're buzzing, you're in good shape, you're ready to get out and just do your best. And then suddenly the morning of, you wake up and it's like a threat. It's something to be scared of. It's something that's generating fear and anxiety, and you're worried about it. You're seeing it as a threat to all the hard work you've put in. What if I don't achieve the goal that I've set? Or what if I look stupid in front of people? A threat to my confidence and my kind of self-belief and my whole image. Maybe it's a threat to my goals. I've set myself a goal. If I don't win this, I'm not going to qualify through to whatever championships. So then suddenly we start to see that competition as something that's a threat to us. And that's normal. Our attention narrows. So we often become really fixated with certain kind of small, maybe irrelevant things on a normal day. Like you don't have a certain thing with you, and suddenly it becomes the most important thing that you get that thing, whether it's a certain drink. For me, for a girl, it might be, for me, I was always making sure I had an extra hair tie in case anything snapped before I went racing. All those little things that you just become fixated with. And some of those things you get fixated with could be how your body feels. So you might wake up the morning of competition and you wake up and you kind of move around. You go, oh my God, my legs feel so heavy. My body feels so tired. Everything feels kind of blah. And that's really normal. But, how often have we actually woken up and the first thing in the morning is, how does my body feel? Probably not that often. You probably just roll out of bed and get on with it. But on competition morning, it's really important that our body feels good. So it's the first thing we pay attention to. So any little ache or tiredness or stiffness or soreness, then we become really, really aware of. And obviously, because we need our body to perform today, we're more conscious of how it feels. And finally, we make decisions based on our emotions. So, you might have a competition plan with your coach. You've been preparing for it. You've worked on it. in training for months, and then suddenly the day of the competition, you back off and think, no, I don't think I can do it anymore. And you lose trust, you lose confidence. And then you go based on your emotion, which could be panic, could be fear, could be anger, frustration, whatever that emotion may be. It probably isn't based on logic. And basically what happens is nerves are just a stress response. It's a response to the circumstance. It's a response to what's coming up. And what happens in that circumstance is if we don't have control over that stress response and we don't know how to deal with it, it starts to stop our logical part of our brain, which is in our frontal cortex, front of our brain. That's kind of gets hijacked by our emotional control center, which is in the middle of our brain and our amygdala. And that can start to take over. So suddenly our emotions are taking over, our kind of instinctive, habitual things take over, and all the logic and all of the kind of reason and rational kind of thinking gets switched off. It doesn't have to happen, but it's learning that, first of all, learning and knowing that this is what can happen when I get really nervous and I kind of buy into the nerves. That's, the first step is understanding this happens. Okay. It's not enough to understand what happens. How do I now deal with it, Jessie, is probably what you're thinking. So again, focusing on the controllables. If you think about it, on a competition day, what are the things when you pay attention to them make you most nervous? Let's be honest, it's probably not the things in the center. It's probably not even the things in the middle circle. It's probably the things on the outside circle that are what make you feel nervous. The time, oh my God, I have to start warming up in 10 minutes. Oh, I don't want to warm up. I don't want to compete. Well, the referee, obviously you don't have control over that, but it might make you nervous because oh my God, every time I have him, he's so strict, he's so this. And your competitors, obviously the idea of competing against one other person, that's probably going to make you nervous, being concerned about the outcome. The competition order could be that you're first up in the morning or you're last and you're watching everybody else and you're getting more nervous. And the environment, is it noisy? Is it too hot? Is it quite big and open and there's no one there? If you were to look at those three circles, where are the things that probably make you feel most nervous? I'm going to make a guess and say that most of them lie in that outside circle. And if they're out of our control, why are we giving them so much time when all we know is that when we focus on them, they make us feel worse? So acknowledging them is fine. Acknowledging, you have to compete against someone, you have to acknowledge it, but not giving it so much attention that it's actually ruining your whole preparation and build up. So recognizing, I'm competing against this person today. I've competed against them before. I know they're good. All I can do is focus on my choices, my competition plan, what I decide to do. So focusing on the controllables is not just for coping with COVID. This is really important when it comes to actually psychological preparation. And a big part of psychology and sports psychology sits in this kind of cognitive behavioral therapy kind of realm. So this idea of understanding and controlling your thoughts so that they don't affect your emotions and then in turn your actions. So as we've said, we can't control our emotions, we can respond to them. So all of these three are linked to each other. If we think in a certain way, it can make us feel a certain way. And when we feel or think a certain way, we might act in a certain way. So to kind of give an example, again, you wake up the morning of your competition and you go, oh my God, this is the biggest competition of the year. It has to go well. And then you start becoming aware of how your legs feel. And then you start to feel nervous and you panic and you're stressed and you worry. And what happens when you're thinking that way and you feel that way, you're probably it may not happen, but you're probably more likely to make mistakes. You become physically tense, you get distracted, or you might stray from the plan. So if all of these things are happening, it's probably not leading to the best performance that you're capable of. So where in terms of my work, we sit up in that top quadrant, and that top section, not top quadrant because it's only three, sorry, that top section, which is around your thoughts, because your thoughts are the first controllable thing. So instead of thinking, okay, today is the biggest competition of the year, has to go well. Today is the day I've been preparing for all year. I'm excited. So you still you're still aware that today is a big day, but instead of being, this has to go well, it's like, I'm excited. I've worked all year. This is now the fun bit, or this is the bit that I've been working for. So nerves are probably still going to be there because you've acknowledged that it's a big day, and it is a big day. But instead of with nerves come the panic, instead it's nerves and anticipation, that kind of excitement, all those positive things. So then you might be more likely to focus on the process. You're probably more likely to, I haven't said here, but stick to the competition plan. Focus on what's in your control. Do what you planned to do. So what that leads us to is your self-talk. And it's probably the last thing we're going to, I'm just conscious of time. So this will be the last thing we'll probably finish on here, unless we have a bit more time and Adrian can kind of give us a bit of an indication of that. So watching your self-talk, because self-talk is something we engage in all of the time. So self-talk is our internal dialogue. It's what we're telling ourselves all the time. And one of the first things I would say to an athlete is to imagine that self-talk, that little voice that's going on in your head that's negative and telling you you're nervous and you're stressed or so-and-so is so much better than you. Imagine speaking to yourself like you would to your friend. So imagine one of your training partners is saying all the negative things to you that you're saying to yourself. How would you respond to them? If you would never speak to yourself or to someone else the way you do to yourself. You'd never be as negative or as critical or as harsh as you are on yourself, telling yourself if you make a mistake, you're an idiot and why'd you keep doing this? When are you ever going to learn? You're obviously just not good enough, blah, blah, blah. If you saw your friend make a mistake in the gym, you would never say all that to them because you're probably a nice person. So imagine you speaking to yourself like you would to someone else if you had to say it out loud. So there's two kind of techniques when it comes to your self-talk. And these are things you guys can go away and again, practice today. And it doesn't have to be related to competition. This self-talk happens across the board, whether it's with work or with school or with anything else that's going on. Sorry, I'll just check. Perfect. Thanks, Adrian. Okay, so the thought challenging is when you challenge that thought. So actually arguing back with it. So things like you might think to yourself, I'm not good enough. What could you say instead? So instead of saying I'm not good enough and then thinking of all the reasons why, challenging and say, well, actually, why aren't you good enough? You qualified to be here. Of course you're good enough. I haven't done enough. I'm not ready. Instead of thinking that, because let's be honest, how many of us have ever thought that we haven't done enough? We could have done more training. We probably should have done one more session. There's nothing else you could have done. You did everything that was asked you. You're ready. So notice I'm using that third person voice. So with that self-talk, it is literally imagining like you're telling yourself these things like it's from an external place, because it's easier to separate yourself and be more positive and be more objective when you're talking to yourself rather than having just a conversation. I'm good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm great. I'm not great. Okay, so I lost to him or her before. I'll never beat them. So, you're standing there and that's quite factual. It's not an irrational thought at all. I've never beaten them before. What's to say I'll beat them again? So going into and saying, well, it doesn't matter what happened before, does it? This is a new day. You're not going to let yourself think like that. So challenging it is nearly kind of stopping the thought in its tracks with fact. Say, okay, like that, I'm not good enough. Well, qualified to be here, you must be good enough. Just because other people here might have more experience, you are still good enough to be here. Other than thought challenging, there's the idea of thought reframing. So thought reframing is where you take a negative thought that you might have. So it might be a recurring one, it might be a one-off thought, changing that to be something that's more positive. And if that can't be more positive, to be more constructive, so more helpful for you. So a negative thought could be, I need to qualify for this competition. I should win this race. Sorry, I keep using athletics terms here. I have to beat so-and-so. He or she is way better than me. I'm so tired, I can't keep going. Probably, okay, other than the race, probably all thoughts you've had before. So I need to qualify, I should win, I have to. Look at the language that's used in there. It's a lot of pressure language. I need to, I should, I have to. What follows with that kind of pressure language is all the negative consequences. Like, I need to win this competition. I should win this competition. And because if I don't, here's all the bad things that will happen. Maybe I'll think I'm a fluke, or I'll lose confidence, or I'll lose funding, or I won't get to the next round, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of internal pressure. I have to, I should, I need to. So how could you make those more positive? And I think it's such a simple thing. It's just changing your language. So instead of it being, I need to qualify for this competition because That's in reality, do you need to qualify for it or do you want to? So I want to qualify for this competition. I'm capable of winning. So again, going back to that evidence gathering, I'm capable of winning, and here's all the reasons why, because I've done this, or I've worked on that, or I've improved in this area. I have to beat so-and-so because I want to beat. Because again, you might have won 20 national championships in a row. It doesn't mean you're entitled to win your next fight. Every fight you go into is not a have to or a should, it's a want. So just changing that language, you can see how it even changes the energy in the around saying it. I need to versus I want to. I should versus I'm capable of. I'm capable of, here's the reasons. Doesn't mean you might be less nervous, but it doesn't kind of, the nerves don't take away the confidence that you have. He or she is way better than me. Okay, instead of just saying that and leaving it as is, okay, maybe he or she is better because they're more experienced. But I know that these are still the strengths that I'm bringing to it, and this is what I'm going to learn from this fight, no matter what. And then we've probably all had that thought, I'm just so tired. You're going into your last round and you just think, I'm just wrecked. This has been such a difficult fight. I don't know, can I keep going? In that case, a positive thought might not fit. There's no point trying to tell yourself, I'm fine. I'm not tired. I have loads of energy, because you're just kidding yourself. So that's sometimes where being more constructive and more, realistic can be positive. So instead of saying, I'm so tired, I can't keep going, telling yourself, I'm meant to be tired. I've never fought this hard. I've never been through this many rounds in one day. I've never had such a hard fight. I'm meant to be tired, but I know I've trained for it. I know I'm prepared. I know I'm capable of coping. So instead of it being just a direct positive, it's more constructive and kind of saying, yeah, I am tired, but I'm able to cope with it. I know I am, because of the evidence that I've gathered already. So just quickly run through. So I might just skip through this, but this is the idea of visualizing success. Now, this is not something we're going to do here and now, because it's just something needs a bit of work. But visualization is something that can help you with nerves, because it can just help you, feel like you've been there already. So imagining yourself in successful scenarios, imagine yourself attacking and, achieving your competition plan the way you want to. So I'm going to leave this in the slides and you can have a look yourself, but it's not something, it takes a little bit more time to go through. So it's just the idea of actually imagining scenarios, imagining successful scenarios, so that when it actually happens in real life, it's like you've already been there. So trying to imagine it in as much detail, in familiar scenarios, bringing all those senses into it to try and create a really vivid image. And finally, just some breathing exercises. So what I'll do, rather than trying them here and now, is I will send, so breathing exercises are brilliant for nerves, because obviously all the work you've done there, your thinking, your visualization, that happens in advance. Breathing exercises are for the there and now. You are just about to walk out into the mat, or you're literally just about to go in, or you're in between rounds, or there's been a pause in the fight. That's your chance to do a bit of breathing exercises to actually calm the physical signs and nerves. So the butterflies, the beating heart, your fast breathing. Breathing exercises give that physical kind of control and that mental kind of space to just regroup and reevaluate. So there's 3 different types. I'm going to send a link to each one that you can try. And they're just a really nice way to just gain that control back again. Because when you're nervous, everything is fast and it feels like you're out of control. So there's belly breathing. There's box breathing, which is a lovely one to try, which is kind of inducing. So belly breathing is actually breathing using your belly rather than your chest. So it kind of distracts your mind because you're breathing in a different way. There's box breathing. And again, these are all on YouTube. They're really easy to find and they're things you can go away and practice now. So box breathing is to create a kind of a rhythmic pattern. So breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds, exhaling for 4 seconds, and then holding for 4 before you move on. And it's a really nice way to create some rhythm, gain some control, and actually distract yourself from whatever's causing you to be nervous, because you have to count. And then another one you can try if you're a fidgeter, as you can probably see my hands are going 90. If you're a bit of a fidgeter, actually breathing using your hands. So if you have a bit of time, you're sitting in a stance waiting to go, breathing, instead of counting, it's inhaling as you move up, exhaling as you move down. Inhaling, exhaling, inhaling, exhaling. And again, these are just really nice in the moment, quick, easy things that you can do. the other things you want to do in advance, because they're actually coping with the nerves and coping with the things that cause the nerves. These are things that are kind of like the plaster. You're nervous now. What am I going to do about it? So guys, like I said, I could talk about this all night. And I think the addition of some coping strategies for COVID is what's caused us to run over a little bit. I apologize, but I'm mad to hear all your questions. So please, let's get into some questions and hear what you guys would like to know. And yes, thank you so much for being so attentive already. So I might just stop the share and we can actually see each other and see what questions you guys have for me.
Yeah, no problem, Jessie. So again, thank you to everybody. Well, to Jessie first and foremost for giving us all of this wonderful content to get stuck into. And then absolutely to everybody who contributed one way or another with the Mentimeter. So what I would like to do very quickly is just show you some of the questions. We do have 13 questions, and the best part about all of that is that people have had their a quick chance to, I suppose, look over the questions and upvote or decide which questions needed to have that little bit of attention. So hopefully everybody can see those there. So the very first question that was asked, and again, these are all anonymous. In your experience, are there mental or psychological differences between the younger and older athlete? And should the older athlete adopt a changing mindset as they get older? So
what a brilliant
9
question.
people interested in this one. So
yeah, really good question. I would say, in my experience, I would say age doesn't tend to be as much of a factor as experience. So I could talk to a 16-year-old gymnast who's as, in terms of their mindset, as advanced as a 26-year-old in a different sport. So it's all on experience and, what they're experiencing in terms of how long they've been in it, but also the experience of like levels of competition and levels and intensity of training. So I would say that adopting the mindset to, as you improve your skills, improving, you have more experience, you have more lived experience from setbacks. That's where I think your mindset adapts because, you might be a 50-year-old athlete who's only just started, which means your experience level is that of someone much younger. So I think it's really interesting. I think it's, instead of taking age out of the equation and bringing it instead into what's my experience, how long have I been in it, what have I learned, what do I know, what do I have yet to know. I think that instead, so I think age is irrelevant. I think unless you're considering in terms of what training you're capable of doing when you get to a certain age, but otherwise I think it's very much on individually depending on what your experiences are.
Okay. So what can you do to push yourself when you lose motivation, be it for training at home or at the end of a fight you're losing?
Okay, really good question again. And I think the simple thing is remembering why. What is my why? Why am I doing it? So in the fight, why am I doing it? Why am I here? You're losing and you might just think, oh, what's the point? I'm losing anyway. What's the point? Well, why am I in this fight? Is it just to win it, or what else can I gain? I'm not just in every fight to win. I'm also in fights to learn, to improve my skills, to gain experience. And if I just give up here now, I'm not going to learn anything. And I'm also going to feel disappointed. At least if you're in the end of a fight and you're losing, the motivation could be, okay, well, I want to get the best out of this so I learn something from it. I can hold my head up high. So remembering your why. And then when it comes to training and training at home, which I know is so challenging, is remembering why I'm doing it. It'd be very easy to just stop training for the whole month of December. I can't spar. I'm in these pods. I don't really like it. But what is your why? What is your goal for next year? You want to qualify for World Championships, Europeans. You want to improve your skills. Is what I'm doing now going to contribute to that? And if it is, I need to keep doing it. If it isn't, why? If not by not training, how is this going to contribute, or how is this going to take away from my goals? So when it comes to being motivated, it's remembering the long term, why I'm doing this, why I put myself through this day in, day out, because there's that external goal, there's that love of it, why I enjoy it. It's something that, if you're injured, you probably have to ask yourself day in, day out, why am I doing this boring rehab? It's so that I can get back doing what I love, which is competing and training and fighting. So it's the same when you're doing the training at home that you're just not enjoying. There's a purpose to it. It's just right now it's hard to see. what is my why? Maybe write it down, have it somewhere as a reminder in your room so that you see it every day.
Really nice. And so let's see, we have ideas for motivating elite athletes during a long break from competition or coming back from injury or setback. Now, I think you probably just covered a lot of that, but if there's anything you want to add to it.
Yeah. So I suppose as well, much as remembering your why, again, if it's a long-term break or long-term injury, it can still seem a bit irrelevant because it's 10 months away. So setting little goals, setting those small process goals. So short, like I know I said not about short-term goals. When it comes to something like an injury, what are the things we want to achieve? What progression and improvements we want to see by next week, in 2 weeks? Tracking those improvements, setting those little processes, and actually seeing those little progressions. Because I think when you have that long time away from competition, and obviously competition is where you see where you're at, or when you're back competing, it's seeing, why am I still progressing? So setting those little goals to have little boosts of confidence, to see that I'm moving forward. And if possible, having a training buddy, because, you know, sometimes it's very hard, especially at the moment when you're injured or you're training from home and there's no competition, you feel like you're the only one and you kind of forget that everyone else is doing it. So having some way to see that someone else is in the same boat. So maybe it's an injury buddy. Okay, we have different injuries, but let's both say we'll do our rehab, even if it's over Zoom. We just check in with each other afterwards. How'd your rehab go today? Having something just to kind of keep you, you know, interested, motivated, and recognizing you're not on your own can be really important, because it can be a really challenging time.
Smaller wins are important.
Smaller wins are key.
Okay. So some strategies for keeping an athlete calm or quickly recovering focus from a mistake during a match or a fight.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think the very last thing I touched on was breathing. Breathing is can be really underutilized, but such a valuable asset, and it's something we can all do. And it's just about controlling it. So keeping calm, if we were to do those breathing exercises, and I would really encourage you guys in your own time to try follow those YouTube tutorials and actually try those breathing activities and notice the feeling of calm that sets over you when all you're doing is thinking about breathing and physically breathing. There's no thoughts about anything else. It's that kind of mindful breathing. Just focus on what you're doing, consciously breathing and giving that attention to that. Because obviously when you're not calm, it's probably because you're responding to something else that's going on externally. So bringing that attention back internal, breathing to calm the nervous system, calm all of that, and actually calm and gather your thoughts again. I think it's really, really important. I think it's probably one of the simplest strategies, I would say. There's lots of other ones, but I think breathing is the one that's just so simple to include.
Okay. So something more personal to you, what did a typical season look like for you as an athlete? Hours training, main areas of focus, etc.
Yeah, okay. Typical season. So I suppose
you're not injured.
With the 400 hurdles, it's when I'm not injured, exactly. Yeah, because an injured season is very different. So I suppose depending on the time of year, I only competed in the summer, because the 400-meter hurdles, you can't run them indoors, and obviously I didn't run cross country. So my competition season was kind of May to August. So it was a very, very short window. So I spent most of the year training. So I was in that boring, long gaps between competing year in, year out anyway, unless I decided to break it up with the indoor racing. So I suppose my typical week, if I was in a typical training week during a normal block of training, was 6 days a week I was training. I was a student athlete all the way through. So I was training in the morning. I was probably in college in the morning or afternoon. And then in the evening I was training. So I did double days, I think 4 days out of the 6. So I would have done 2 weights, strength and conditioning sessions. I would have done 3 track sessions, 2 long runs. Now long runs for us were like 20 to 30 minutes. Once a week we went out to Cratloe Woods in Limerick to run hills. We did a circuit session once a week, and then just some kind of general flexibility and mobility in our own time. And plyometrics. So that's what I mentioned before, which was like hurdle, hops and bounds. It was things that quick, explosive kind of power. So I didn't train for a long time. And that's the beauty of being a sprinter, is that we didn't train for long times. It was intense. So, most of our training sessions were an hour and a half max. And most of our time was spent recovering, especially on the track. Our running sessions were you know, it might have been 6 fast 300s would have been a hard session. So we probably spent most of the time warming up, preparing our body. You know, you'd run for about 39, 40 seconds, and then you'd recover for 7 minutes, and then you'd run again, and that would be our session. So anyone who does any distance background would kind of laugh at that. But, you know, if anyone who's ever sprinted before, you'd know speed kills. So a lot of our week was really focused on making sure our body was ready to do this for the high intensity and then recovered from the high intensity. So in terms of the hours, I didn't spend a huge amount of time running or training. It was making sure my body was able for the intensity. So that was what a normal week looked like. And then in training, when I was competing, obviously it was so different because it depended where, like you guys are probably traveling to competitions week in, week out. So then it was just a case of maintaining our training, maintaining our fitness. So the main bulk of work was done over the winter in the cold and the dark, unfortunately. So yeah, main focus for me was speed, plyometrics, strength, you know, a bit of everything. So kind of had to be quite an all around. So I loved it and I missed it, but so that was kind of what a typical week would have looked like, for example.
Excellent, thanks for that. So Jessie, how do you help younger athletes, especially girls, to recognize and acknowledge their strengths?
Really good question. It's something I'm really passionate about, you know, having been a female athlete and obviously everything with 20 by 20 and stuff at the moment. I think it's actually just talking to them and, you know, actually working with it, because it's not a natural thing for any athlete to do. And it's really, especially, I think, not a natural thing for a female athlete or females in general to be really, you know, having that confidence and that self-belief and that kind of outward, you know, because we see it as something, I think, as an Irish, you know, in Ireland as being, you know, lacking modesty, and we all want to be modest. No one wants to be the person to kind of be boasting. And I think female athletes are particularly bad for it. So I think it's actually, you know, if you're training a female athlete, telling them what they're good at, instead of always working on the things we're not good at, reminding them and say, look, these are the things we're working on, but you're brilliant, you know, you're brilliant at this, and we're going to make this better, you know. So making sure your actual language and the conversation around it is reminding people what they're good at. So it's something that they're used to hearing, rather than always being like, you're great, but here are the things we want to make you better. It's like, you're great because here are the things. And then maybe in conversation, if you have, you know, post-competition debriefs or end of year debriefs, telling people what they're good at, you know, because I think sometimes people need, and even if they know, everyone likes to be told what they're good at, even if you might blush and get a bit embarrassed. It's always having that reminder that as much as we're working on and you feel like you have so many weaknesses, you have loads of strengths. Here they are. So having that conversation, I think, to, you know, to get that conversation going and starting it early, telling these athletes what they're good at from a young age, they're used to hearing that kind of thing. But really good question. And I think it's something that it's hard to know exactly what the right thing to do is. So just normalizing the conversation about it with girls is really important.
That's great. Thanks for that. Is it still possible to have high expectations as an athlete when priorities have shifted from competition to family, significant others, etc.?
Yeah, look, I think why not? I think it's, you know, this is the typical political answer, but it depends on the person and depends on you. And I suppose it depends on your support structure around you. So, you know, your priorities have shifted. There's no reason why you can't still be an athlete, but have you got the support structure in place that helps you? You know, if your priorities are, you know, family, significant other, maybe home, work, are you being supported to actually still have some priority lie with your, you know, your athlete identity, your athlete self? Because obviously, you know, you're only one person and you are trying to balance things. So I think it's still very possible, but it depends on your situation and how much you want it. Because I think, like anything, and I think it's always said, is that if you want something, you'll make the time for it. There won't be any excuse. And I think, you know, for me, when I came to shove towards the end of my career, I was in a position where I had to choose between working as a sports psychologist or staying as an athlete. And it was just too difficult to manage. But up until then, it was something that I was able to manage, but maybe I could have put more time into trying to make it work better. So yeah, it depends on you. At the end of the day, it is, instead of asking me, is it possible, ask yourself, is this possible for me? And really consider your situation and all of the things, the support structures you have around you. if you want it enough, you'll make it work.
Super. Can you suggest some simple strategies for keeping calm or reducing anxiety on the day of competition? And I think you probably did cover a good few of those after the question was asked.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah. So I suppose the breathing activities, I'm a big fan of mindfulness and the apps, the mindfulness apps. So obviously breathing is something that it's reliant on you doing it. Sometimes the mindfulness apps are guided, they guide you through mindfulness audio. So it kind of takes the thinking out of it. One app I really like is called Smiling Mind. It's an Australian, so it's kind of like Headspace, but basically it's free. And there's sport specific sections. So there's ones that, that could be a little bit longer, rather than just trying to focus on your breathing. Because sometimes if you're not used to focusing on your breathing, it can be kind of hard at the start. So having someone guiding you through it can be really, really helpful. Having that mindful, being in the moment, because that anxiety, that calmness, or that lack of calmness comes from thinking ahead to what's coming. Whereas when you're being in the moment, you're not attaching those emotions to it. You're just in the moment, focusing on my breathing, focusing on what this voice is telling me. It's only when you start to think ahead to what's coming is when the anxiety happens. So those are some ideas.
Right. So what did your routine look like right before getting on the track? Was there anything you did every time just before you got onto the track?
You know what? This is a really interesting question because you've asked about my routine. And then you also asked a little bit about what maybe a ritual is. So a routine is, like I said, with sleep, when it came to sleep, is those repeated, behaviors that you do over and over again. And is there anything you do every time before you go on the track? That could be a ritual. So it could be that kind of thing that you do. So it could be, see people blessing themselves, or, kissing a necklace or something. They're more of a ritual because it might not be specific to what you're about to do. And to answer your question, did I have any? I suppose I kind of tried to eliminate any kind of ritual behaviors because I realized they might not always be in my control. So I remember when I was younger, I used to have like a lucky teddy, and I remember the panic that set in when I didn't have him in the competition. I couldn't find him. And again, like I said, all my attention was finding this teddy. I dropped him in the warm-up area, and it had no bearing on my performance. Having a teddy in the warm-up area had no bearing, but it caused anxiety for me. So I tried to remove anything ritualistic like that, or lucky socks, or a certain pair of spikes, or certain this, because once it's gone, then it panics. But I did have, my specific warm-up routine that I would always go through. I'd go through my warm-up drills in order. I would always give myself a certain amount of time between. So we would have a call room in athletics. So I gave myself maybe 10 minutes between when I finished my warm-up in my pre-race plan, between my warm-up and when I had to go into call room, which is when they kind of checked your number, you sat and were put into your race order and all that kind of stuff. I gave myself 10 minutes to, maybe if my coach was there, talk through the race plan again, put on my number onto my vest, just have that bit of time. And that was maybe what I always did. And then right before I got into the blocks, I was obsessive about my hair being back. So I'd do that last check, tighten my hair, tighten my shoes, and then just breathe, because I kind of was like, well, everything is done now. So I used to just breathe and just stand there with my hands on my hips, either being confident or pretending. So I didn't have a huge amount of rituals. It was very similar, very boring, I'm afraid.
Thank you anyway. Right. So any standout moments or memories from your own competitive career?
Yeah. So look, I suppose you can't say you've been to the Olympics and not include a moment. So actually, it's funny, from the London Games, the standout moment for me wasn't running, because of the 2.5 weeks I spent in the kind of whole Olympic bubble between the holding camp and being in the village. I spent about 60 seconds on the track. So it's not really the standout for me. Actually, the standout was walking into the Olympic Stadium in the opening ceremony. I still will never forget the chills that went through me when I walked out, because obviously it was a full stadium, music was blaring, I was followed right behind Katie Taylor. She was holding the Irish flag, and it was that real moment of like, oh my God, this is where I am. And that was just, if I could go back through my whole career to just experience that feeling again, never mind some of the races that I've done, that feeling was just something I'll never experience again. It was so incredible. So that was a huge standout moment. And then on a more silly note, in the closing ceremony, I got to see the Spice Girls perform. So that was very exciting.
Fantastic.
And then in terms of competition, I had a whole summer in 2011 where I just had a real big breakthrough. Every race I went into, I got faster. It was just that year where it kind of consolidated all the hard work. It was my final year of college. I've been working with my coach for 4 years, and all the work was starting to fall into place. And I ended up, getting an Olympic B standard, Irish under 23 record, 5th at a European Championship. So it was just that whole summer more than anything stands out as in terms of competitive, because it was the summer where just racing just worked. And it was the summer that I was like, this is something I can really pursue. So yeah, difficult to narrow it down, unfortunately.
Awesome. Did sports psychology play an important part in your career, or did this happen over time? Was it a key part of Team Ireland's prep?
Yeah. So sports psychology didn't play an important part of my career, funnily enough. I have never actually been to a sports psychologist as an athlete, which is crazy. Considering the role that I'm in, I had never sat in a sports psychology consultation. So it was something, because I was studying it, I had this, uninformed and misinformed belief that I kind of knew what they were going to do. And my mum was always at me, because I was injured a lot, go and see a sports psychologist. And I said, no, I know what they're going to say. They're going to do this, that, and the other. But just like a physio or a doctor wouldn't go and expect to treat themselves, I was naively thinking I knew what they were going to say. And even if it was just someone else to talk me through and put different things in perspective, I would have really benefited. So it actually didn't play an important part, other than the fact that I was studying it. But it was, and it was it a key part in Team Ireland's prep? It is now. Was it in 2012? It was very different, because there wasn't any sports psychologists in the institute working in the building. There were sports psychologists you could see who were affiliated, but myself and Kate Kirby, who's the head of sports psychology, weren't actually based in the building. So it was a more difficult path to actually find them than it was to find a physio or a strength and conditioning coach. So it was still a key part. A lot of people did work with them, but it wasn't as integrated into the team as it is now. Right now, it's really important, and most of the athletes, if not all of the athletes who will be in Tokyo, will have worked with a sports psychologist. And both of us will be traveling to the games, fingers crossed, because that's the value that it has been placed. So yeah, it's a key part for sure now, but it's taken a while to get there.
Right. We have 3 questions left. I think these are the shorter ones. So how long does it take to adjust to a sleep schedule?
You know what? That's a good question, because I actually don't know the answer, because I think it's like anything. You might see some research about, changing habits take 21 days, and some might say 60 days, some might say 10. I don't think there's any set time. It will depend on you. And I suppose it will depend on how well you stick to your schedule, how well you stick to your structure. And I suppose how bad your sleep routine is, or how bad you are at falling asleep. Like if this is a habit that's for 10 years, you don't fall asleep for hours and hours and hours, it will probably take a bit longer. Whereas if you're just someone who's a kind of bad for not going to bed at the right time, it mightn't take as long. So it really depends on what your sleep kind of looks like now and how much of it needs to be adjusted. So sorry, it's not a very clear cut answer, but I think it's up to you to see just how bad your sleep schedule is now. I'm someone who hasn't got a great sleep schedule, but I fall asleep like that. So it would take me no time, but someone who is a notoriously bad sleeper and insomniac would probably take a lot longer.
Sorry to tell you. Okay.
Sorry.
So what helps you to encourage yourself to run?
Well, back then it was because it was kind of my job. It was what I was really good at, and it was what I did. It was who I was. I was a runner. It was my thing. Whereas now I do it to keep fit. Now I don't run for any other reason other than it's something that I enjoy doing. It's something mentally I really enjoy, because it's kind of my outlet from my little box room. And it took me a long time when I got back into running after I retired to not compare myself to when I was really fit. And that was a big adjustment. And it took me a long time to realize that I don't feel as fit as I did, or I'm running up I did a lot of hill running and running up steps before, and I still really enjoy that, but I know I'm not as fast as I used to be, or I need a lot more recovery. And actually adjusting to that difference was hard, but I still see it as something that it feels so freeing. It's something I love doing. It is putting my headphones in, not timing it, not putting any, I don't know what distances I run until I feel tired, and then I run home. And knowing how good I feel afterwards and how good it makes my body feel and how mentally refreshed I feel is what encourages me to do it, as much as I hate the thought of it and hate the first minute of it.
Yeah, you don't find that many running fans in the taekwondo community, I'll tell you that much. But our last question, but it's actually kind of a biggie: how to deal with losses?
Great question, because look, let's be honest, we all have to do it at some stage, some more than others. And how to deal with losses is going back to very early on in the presentation and actually reflecting and debriefing on them. So trying, it's very easy to kind of say, oh, I'm just going to put that out of my memory and forget about it. But actually, by trying to forget about it, you're not. It's just going to sit in the background somewhere, and something will, you might be in a situation, you might end up back in that venue or up against that same person, and it'll bring all those memories back that you never dealt with. So actually, my best way of dealing with a loss is to actually deal with it head on. So when it initially happens, allow yourself to feel the emotion. If you're angry or you're sad or you're frustrated, feel that emotion for a day or two. Set a time limit on it, and then actually reflect. So maybe with your coach or with someone, sit down and reflect. Okay, I lost. What happened? Let's talk through it. What happened? What went wrong? What could have been better? What am I going to do next time? And how am I going to learn from this? Because rather than just seeing it as a loss and that's it, actually recognizing this as not just a loss, but a chance to learn. Because if you never actually deal with it, it's always going to sit in the back of your head, especially if it was quite a significant loss or a significant circumstance in which you lost. If you never deal with it, it's going to sit in your subconscious, and it will actually come back to bite you in the ass later on. So coping and dealing with it, and actually, like I said, with the kind of how you reflected on lockdown or how you reflect on 2020, doing that with a loss as well, and doing it sooner so that you can put the lessons into place and you've dealt with it. And writing them down is going to be really good, because there's nearly that feeling of like when you've written it down, close the book, and it's like, okay, we're parking that. I've closed the book on that now. We're taking the lessons, we're moving forward, and we're not going to keep looking back at it. And it's something I struggle with a lot. I was the worst for always playing back over those bad situations, and it takes a lot of conscious effort to not fall into that. So that would be my advice, and a really good question to finish off, actually, quite an important one.
And again, just a huge thank you to Jessie for giving us your time and taking the time to answer all of those questions in particular, because obviously that's the part that brings it from a generic presentation to something that's personal to the people that were here. Exactly. And, again, thank you to the audience who helped out by asking those questions, upvoting those questions, and making this a very personal and tailored presentation to everybody who was here and who was on it. And we hope you enjoyed the content. We'll certainly distribute anything that Jessie wants to share with us in terms of those the tools, whether it was the goal setting tools, the breathing exercises, the YouTube clips, anything along those lines. We'd be happy to distribute them for everybody. And just on behalf of the Irish national team, Grandmaster Boss, our visiting guest, and all of the audience who've jumped in to pay attention, huge thank you to Jessie, and certainly look forward to seeing you and hearing from you again at some point in the future.
Yeah, look, thank you all for having me. I apologize it went on so long. There was a lot to cover, so I hope you all got something out of it. Thanks so much for all the questions. They were brilliant.
Thank you, Jessie.
Very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Enjoy your Sunday.
Thanks.